Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So I don't have the chat open. So if there's anything that you guys want to add, I consider this to be a pretty informal session, at least for me. I like dialogue. So again, if you have any questions, let me know. Just an FYI, so I've never presented on Zoom, so this is my first time. Yay. But also, something is wrong with my computer, so you will see not only the presentation, but also the notes. So because when I put it in full presentation mode, it just drastically slows down. But so what we're going to be talking about today is suicide and youth of color. And so as you all, I don't know if you've read anything or just seen the news, this is becoming, suicide in our young people is becoming a serious, serious concern. And what we are doing because I work for the Center for Suicide Prevention and Research, and what we do is work with schools, community agencies, we do trainings, all that good stuff to provide, to let individuals know, whether it's the youth or even a teacher, a peer, adult peer, know what are the warning signs, what are the risk factors when it comes to suicide, so that they can ultimately know what that looks like and take that student to the next step. So this is actually something that I find to be very passionate about, because this is me. I was once a young adolescent Black girl, and now I'm a Black woman with a young Black boy as a son. So this is something that I want to get as much information as I can to be able to help him as well as my community. So I'm going to take a second and share my screen with you all. Let me, here we go. Can you all see this okay? Okay, perfect. So I have a little YouTube video. What this is a video from Taraji P. Henson, the actress, who she actually opened up she's got a Boris, what is it? Her father. He was a veteran who experienced mental health struggles, but back when he was growing up and he was expressing his struggles, he was known as crazy. So what she did is she became an advocate in her community and around the world to bring awareness of mental health struggles and the need for just culturally competent clinicians that look like her, that look like boys and girls who they can relate to, and also breaking down that stigma. So I felt like this was a really great segue into our conversation. Well, you all have to forgive me. Like I said, this is my first time ever presenting like this. So we'll do this.
Hi, Miss Arin. I know that you so that you couldn't see the chat, so I just wanted to affirm you and say that we are here with you while this works. We're all here together. So Ernest said in the chat that we're here with you and we'll figure it out together.
Thank you.
So yes, and then I also personally shared in the chat while we're waiting that in full transparency, hearing the word suicide for whatever reason today for me is triggering. So I'm not sure if I'm alone or not. I think that it's more present for me right now, just considering the times. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that for myself, and then for anyone else who might feel some kind of way about it, because it's not common for me to feel that kind of in my chest, but I do right now. Yeah, look at this. Look at this technology. All right, Taraji. Here we go.
All right. And also thank you for being honest, because suicide is it's a conversation that needs to be had, but it brings up a lot of emotions that, you know, people are not aware of until you're in the midst of that. So So we're gonna watch this.
Am I the only one without sound? So Ernest said that he pulled up the video. So we're gonna go ahead and have Ernest share the screen, show the video, and then we'll turn it back over. Is that okay?
Perfect. He was able to find it?
Our team is pretty amazing, and Ernest is.
I was. Let me get it pulled up real quick.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and check in, and I don't know. Today, I see my nephew in the back. What up? Today, we want to say, oh, nope. See, Ernest is too quick for me.
Can everyone see that? Okay, let's see if the volume works.
I needed you to think about me for a change. On screen, she's an emotional tour de force.
Y'all are really smart.
Now actress Taraji P. Henson is taking that same passion to urban schools nationwide and helping to eradicate the stigma around mental health for African American teens.
For so long, it's been looked upon as a weakness in our community.
And Taraji is determined to change that. Last year, she launched the Boris Lawrence Henson Foundation, named after her father, a Vietnam vet who himself struggled with PTSD and depression.
My dad was the first person who made me feel comfortable with talking about mental health. He felt off, and he talked about it.
So when he was speaking to you about his own struggles, did people think like, whoa?
Yes. Mm-hmm. They would call him crazy, you know, Boris, he crazy. And that's the stigma around it. You have to change first.
To support the mental health of African Americans, Taraji's foundation is partnering with schools like Chicago's High School for the Arts. Black students here say where they come from, it's shameful to talk about anxiety, depression, and trauma.
I think communication for African Americans is an issue. You know, we always think fighting is a way like we on these phones more than we sitting down like verbally how we are.
I'm going to speak on that and see the African American community. That's the misconception of being strong. We got to be strong all the time, because if you seek peace, it's weakness.
It does go way back into history and like how our ancestors were treated. I feel like when men were mistreated in front of their families, they had to come back and like assert dominance in their own homes and make themselves, like, I'm going to at least be respected here.
And that's taking a serious toll. Since the early 1990s, the suicide rate among black children has nearly doubled, while the rate for white children has declined.
This is a national crisis.
This summer, Taraji fought on Capitol Hill for more mental health funding in African American communities.
I don't ever want to get to a place where I can sit and be comfortable spewing facts and numbers about children as young as 5 years old taking their life. That should never be normal.
Making the crisis worse, not enough African American therapists. Today, only 4% of psychologists are black. When Taraji's own son, Marcel, was struggling, she found it nearly impossible to find him one.
Trying to find a culturally competent therapist was like looking for a purple unicorn with a gold horn.
That's why her foundation offers scholarships to encourage more black students to study in the field of mental health.
What do people not know about growing up African American in this country?
I mean, to wake up and to know that at any moment you could be a target just because the color of your skin. That is a heavy weight to carry. People go, but you're a celebrity. Yes, I'm the celebrity, but my son is not. And I wake up every day praying that he makes it home alive. We see these African American men being shot with no weapon. So the message that is being conveyed to the African American community is just that my blackness is a threat. and I can't scrub it off.
To help with anxiety, these schools are creating special peace room lounges for students, painted with emotionally supportive quotes.
And we're letting them know that they are worthy and that they matter in a world that's telling them that they don't right now.
Her goal, to make mental health as important in schools as reading, writing, and arithmetic.
These babies are suffering, and I just feel like it is that's what God sent me here to do. I finally figured it out. We matter.
Thank you so much. That was so helpful. And I'm looking at, I saw the chat, and that is something that I've noticed. And in different, it is presented as urban. In white America, that's just my impression. That's just my opinion, but it is something that I'm just loving this dialogue. So a part of me feels like, and I guess you guys tell me what your thoughts are. I like this dialogue, and I feel like I'm surrounded by a bunch of, very educated individuals. And so it's kind of up to you. Do you want to have this put as a presentation, or kind of have it as a dialogue with questions? And then with questions, I go ahead and provide some insight and information that I have.
We can actually get a vote in the poll, like, if you'd like. So I think that, what are we just gonna say, green and red? So green would keep the presentation up, and even with the presentation up, we're able to have dialogue and see one another and share the mic. So that is an option. And then red would be to kind of forego the presentation, and more so you would facilitate a dialogue conversation. So that would be red. So green for more presentation, a little more structure, and then red for dialogue, facilitated dialogue. Is that what I'm hearing, Arin?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see. If you go to your participants icon in the bottom, it says participants, and then 17 right beside it. And then and then when you open that up, there is a green yes or a red no. And so right now I'm seeing greens, and I'm seeing more greens. Some more people are discovering it. And if you're struggling to find the icon and you want it to vote in the chat, you're more than welcome. Or if you want to unmute yourself and just talk, that's cool too. All right, I'm seeing greens, Miss Arin. So if you want to continue in that way,
we will plug along. Like I said, I can't see the chat, so feel free to unmute yourself. And if you have a question, just let me know. But I just want to start off with, essentially just we're debunking myths here. This is not about necessarily true or false, because it's all some myths that I want to break down. But the myth is that Black boys or Black youth, they don't attempt, let alone die by suicide. And ultimately, as you all are seeing in the video, and as we're seeing now, this is something that is a complete myth. And so from 2011 to 2017, you had just the deaths by suicide, they actually outweighed the number of deaths by homicide. And so ultimately, it is the it's the fourth leading cause of death for Black youth, males specifically, but overall Black youth altogether, it is the second leading cause of death. And so, like I said, it's important to recognize that this is beyond the number of homicides. And we know that maybe every day we can turn on the TV, read the news, and see actually that another youth has died, another adult Black person has died. And so our youth are drastically in jeopardy. And so as this slide says, like, I am taking an opportunity and taking this opportunity to learn more about my passion, because I want to ring the alarm. This is something that is a crisis. It is something that dollars not being put into. And so we have to take it upon ourselves to use this. Well, myself, I have to take it upon myself to use this platform that I've been given to, have this conversation such as I'm doing right now. So some key statistics over here is that over several years, as you see, data has shown that this is an alarming increase in suicide rates for our Black children and our Black teens. Youth under the age of 13, they are twice as likely to attempt and die by suicide than any other ethnicity or any other race. And as you all can see, this suicide rate, it's not only increasing, but it is moving, and it is moving fast.
Hey, Arin,
And so,
are
go
you
ahead.
able to share your screen again?
I forgot I hadn't done that. Thank you. And also let me know if I'm talking fast as well. Can you guys see it again? Perfect, okay.
Man, I guess I'm so confused. I guess I don't even know what I said. Green was for the presentation structure. We had the key in there. I also wanted to just quickly say that if anyone feels safer with participating in the chat, and if they have a question, instead of sharing their mic and saying it out loud, that they can do that. And then they can also chat with anyone privately in the room that they feel comfortable with. I know that our coaches are here and available. So if you want to send a question to like Coach Greg or Coach Chris or Coach Mira, Coach Maul, Coach Ernest, myself, Coach Ariana, you're more than welcome to do that.
Perfect. And if there are any questions that are out there that you all are not aware of, Ms. Tiandra, you have my information. Don't hesitate to send me a link.
I got a question real quick. That's in regards to this?
Yes.
So I'm seeing that there's a huge rate of young African-American Black boys. Is there any data that correlates to the young Black boys that are in like combat sports, specifically like football, like Little League football? And I had a previous like suicide professional development, and I was just really interested on like, is there any data showing like these young men having these head collisions leading to, you know, mental health issues or depression that may cause, you know, things like that? Is there any data or any conversations around that?
So that's a good point, and that's a good question, because as of right now, there's very little research being done about what happened that has caused this drastic increase for our Black youth, our youth of color, to have this skyrocketing increase, because ultimately they're increasing in the rate of attempting suicide and dying by suicide, while as their white counterparts are decreasing. And so at the same time, funds are not being given to researchers who want to research this information. Black researchers, they're actually 10 times as likely or 10 times higher risk of having their request for funds denied. And so we have a lot of, when I say we have a lot of work to do to figure out what's going on, we have a lot of work to do. So it's a really good question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted to quickly raise my hand again. And we did attend training around this topic, and I feel like the information that you're presenting and the statistics you're presenting is completely opposite of the two presentations that I attended before that didn't have this particular focus. So it's like concerning to me, and I want to honor that. And then I also remember attending a workshop around this last year, and the conversation was around mostly Black youth and then people of color with the issue. And then by the end of the day, when it got to the solution, it was very Caucasian. And that was merely, and I asked the question, like, why is that? And a lot of the researchers that were present said that it's about evidence-based practices and research for solutions. And a lot of those evidence-based solutions are developed in predominantly white culture. And then they take that formula and try to insert it into the Black community, and it doesn't resonate. And so that, and then also like the curve against developing evidence-based practice and research is skewed, because that's very heavily white as well, because it was like that head start that we keep going back to just because of our true culture. And I also want to say, like, we're a very inclusive department, and I don't know, or community, and I don't know if that ever needs to be said or if that's just in my conditioning. So I just want to make sure that everyone feels welcome, that we can all be part of the collective solution, because in the liberation of Black boys and Black girls comes the liberation of all of our youth, and vice versa. Yeah.
Absolutely. Was somebody talking? Okay. So I wanted to address that. And so this is the first time I've done research specifically to youth of color, our Black youth, and the suicide rates and suicide. And the majority of my presentations are just dealing with youth in general. And to see that, like I had mentioned in one of these slides, that the rate for white youth of suicide prevention is working. What we are doing at the Center for Suicide and Research is working because the number of white young people, it's decreasing. Now, that's not to say there's still a crisis for them as well. However, it is contradictory because although their number is going down, our number is drastically increasing. We're using extremely lethal means. I remember when I first started, I was doing some research and I found that although girls were attempting suicide more often, they were doing the ODing, the using of like prescription medicines and things like that. And so they weren't necessarily dying by their suicide attempt, whereas the boys were using the more lethal means. However, now research is showing that our Black youth and our Black girls and boys are using those lethal means. They are dying by strangulation from hanging, firearms, poisoning, and things like that. And if they're not dying from their actual suicide attempts, they are dying from the medical complications or the injuries from those suicide attempts. And so it's very hard to, it's easy to, as a safety plan, to remove firearms. But when it comes to hanging, you can do that anywhere. You can ultimately use a lot of things. And these are lethal means that you can just cutting off your air cycle. You can have medical problems from that, and then you're gone. And so this is something that, again, it's a drastic, it's changing. And yes, the curriculum, the information that is out there now about youth in general, it is coming down. But now we need to get that same dialogue and those same prevention and intervention resources to bring the same down. Because there are, and you'll see it in my presentation, we do have a lot of interventions, cognitive behavioral therapy, focusing on the thought process and behaviors, the way those are connected. Dialectical behavior therapy, those are the two therapies that have been studied to be the best therapies to work when it comes to depression and suicidality. As well as, but we have to kind of go a little bit before that. And it's like you said, we're trying to take these and put them and fit them in a box. And we're not necessarily adjusting that well to that. So we have to look at the community. And so I found a lot of information regarding the Black church and how the Black church, they have a role in this, whether they know it or not. They have a role in helping our youth because as a Black race, we tend to be the most religified, if that's a word. But basically, we spend a lot of time in church. We spend a lot of time focusing on spiritual connection, the idea that it's beyond us. And so as such, that is our main community resource. And tapping in that community resource and those clergy members and those ministers, educating them so that they can essentially do the job that we do here. And then they have better access. They also have that trust factor that mental health agencies don't have. So this is good. Any other questions before I move along?
I just had a question about the localization of the data. Do we know how this applies to Columbus, Franklin County, or Ohio specifically? If not, it's okay.
No, not at this point. So have you ever heard of Dr. Ariel? I cannot remember her last name, but she works for the Center for Suicide Prevention and Research. We all work at Nationwide Children's. And so this is her niche. There was actually just a webinar yesterday that dealt with this same topic. I can get to the names of those presenters, but they dealt with the same topic regarding suicide. And so she's the forerunner of a lot of information when it comes to Black youth and suicide.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Okay, I have to scoot this over. Alrighty. So these are, like I mentioned earlier, we're losing a lot of our funds are not there. The funds are there because, you know, in schools in rural areas, we're finding that suicide is something that is a very high action. However, as you see at the top, these major mental health boards, the National Institute of Mental Health, the NIH, the SAMHSA, these are all well-known mental health boards that are we can't help but to wonder, are you ignoring this concern? Because we're seeing this concern, however, we're seeing very, very little research. And like I had mentioned earlier, we're also seeing very little research dollars put into figuring out what has happened in our communities that has caused this drastic increase. So we have another myth that Black male youth are not at a high risk for dying by suicide. And as you see here, that's also a myth, okay? And so death by suicide, and just a little side note, you will hear me as opposed to saying committed suicide, failed, you will hear me say death by suicide or died by suicide, as opposed to those other words, because we're just working to change the dialogue of the way we think. When you hear committed, you think of something negative. When you hear I failed at my suicide attempt, you think of, again, something negative. And we don't want to think of suicide as something that was a pass or fail. So as you see here, the rate of death by suicide for our Black boys has risen. For between the ages of 13 to 19, it's risen 60%. And like I told you all earlier, the number for our Black girls has drastically increased, 182%. And so like I had mentioned before, girls in general were attempting via overdose. Now our girls are not even just Black girls, but girls in general, girls of color, are also using those lethal means to attempt suicide. So you also have here that they have Black males, Hispanic males, they have surpassed the number of deaths by suicide drastically. And then not only are they dying by suicide, but they're also having more medical needs. So like I mentioned earlier, so if you had a suicide attempt, you did not pass away from that suicide attempt. However, you're still requiring medical attention for that. So a little bit more information when it comes to Black males and suicide. As you see, we're seeing more increases in injuries. And sometimes and these numbers can be skewed a little bit because ultimately, if a student or a person has died by suicide, we don't necessarily always know that intent. And that's what is a key factor when it comes to suicide, is that intent. And so if a person has passed away, it can look like an accident. But in actuality, it was not an accident. You get on the road, I'm just gonna drive really fast and hope I run into something, or my car is gonna slide. And it looks like a car accident, but in actuality, you had that intent to kill yourself. And so you're also seeing this injuries from suicide attempts has rose. 122% is what it is rose from. And then not only that, if you all look here, they're getting younger. Our boys are killing themselves, are having suicidal thoughts. I was working at a predominantly Black school in Columbus, Ohio, doing a suicide prevention program. And there was a kindergartner who had said, I want to kill myself. He had safety scissors and said, I want to kill myself. And it's the sad thing that, A, you are so young. And B, it's the fact that no, you cannot, you can barely cut paper with safety scissors. But it's the fact that that intent is there. Something is going on in your person, in your environment, that is saying, I don't want to live anymore. And you would think at 5, 6, 7, all you have to do is figure out, what am I going to have for my snack? All you have to worry about is going and taking your nap. But unfortunately, it's rough now.
I have a question about that. I'm wondering, just with I'm really disturbed by the trend in the massive increase in suicides amongst Black males. And I'm wondering what the origin of those instincts or thoughts might be. I'm wondering if that has to do more with exposure, or, maybe we've heard people say, oh, I could just kill myself. Like, that's a joke that's much more common now. And so maybe younger kids are hearing it more. or are these thoughts that people have experienced since the beginning of time, but they were more guided and nurtured out of those thoughts, right? Is it a lack of something, or is it the presence of something that's increasing these thoughts in our 5 and 6 year olds? Like I can't even fathom a 5-year-old thinking that, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering where it's coming from, or just a thought.
I think
Yeah.
So I saw something on Twitter last night that maybe could contribute to this that was really disturbing, but there's like these TikTok videos where people are putting like these little strings around their neck and they're like jumping off their shower rod. And the girl, it didn't go the way she thought it was going to go. So it actually, like, you could tell it choked her up and she was hanging from her rod, but she wasn't trying to commit suicide. It's just something like on TikTok. I personally don't use TikTok, and it's kind of for that reason because it's all over the place. And that I watched it and I just couldn't believe that like people thought it was funny. I was waiting for the joke because it was really uncomfortable for me to see that, because I was just thinking, what if somebody does that to become a part of the trend on TikTok and they actually, end up committing suicide by accident? But also I do know, like Ernest, what you said, I see a lot of people on social media like kind of like joking about like, oh, I'll just off myself, or like that's become common language.
Yeah.
And I don't think people are always joking about it, but I do know that some people do say that as a joke, like they don't really mean it. And then some people actually do kind of mean it, and they want you to pick up on the fact that like they're being serious when they say that. It's like a cry for help. So I do feel like it's been normalized because I see a lot of people talking about that kind of stuff, and it does make me uncomfortable because it is, especially on Twitter, like it's very normal to see things like that.
Yeah, I think we glorify death in the States. Like it's something you see in movies all the time, not even necessarily suicide, but just killing and taking control and, protection, like all these visuals that we have a society that kind of play into just like death in general. But that's good. That was a good point. Is it Ariana? It's Ariana, right? That was a good point that you made. I really like that.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to jump in and about the facts, like of the 5-year-old. Like, how could a 5-year-old? And I just wanted to invite all of us to really go back and look at our life and what it was like when we were different ages. And I won't even say young, like different ages. And what my approach to everyone is that age is a social construct, much like race. We can't define someone's experience based on how they present demographically. And so I know that I was very experienced and well versed in life at a young age, and saw a lot of things. And that's not everyone's story, but it is some people's story. But even like you never know someone's inner workings. So to define the understanding of a person based on their demographics puts us that means that we're judging and we're assigning our own narrative to that, and rather than being open to listen and observe, and I think that there's something so powerful there. And like even with our young people, I don't call our young people kids because I just don't believe in that language. But the fact that I am supposedly I'm like an adult or something, but I still have the innocence of a child. And I think that that's beautiful, that innocence can still be intact. And I think that all goes, it has a role in how we address one another, how we speak to one another, how present we are to listen, and how transparent we are. And I'll stop after this, but the reason why I could move through feeling like instances of suicide ideation is because my mother shared with me her attempt. And so because I understood that it wasn't a thing that was like out of this world, or not something that we do, I think that gave me the ability to be like, okay, not so much this too shall pass, but at least I have someone to talk to about it. And at least I know that my mother did come out of it or did survive, or you know what I mean? Like, I think that that's important as well. And Ernest also said something about music and pop culture and how it could like influence the increase, but it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because a lot of times with art, you're just expressing your experience. And so, but then also like, what does media feed into and put those images out all the time? So for sure. This is a great conversation.
Yes.
I do want to say that it is 1:42 and we do end directly at 2, but we can always do a part 2 if you're open to it.
I am. Yes. And so, but what you guys had mentioned, it brings me to my next slide about messaging. And we have, you know, our young youth they are diagnosed with ADHD, ADD more often. So you've got that impulsive behavior. You've got the idea that symptoms or what's really going on. Sometimes our parents don't know how to advocate. Our youth don't know how to fully express, this is what I'm experiencing, this is what I have going on. A little self-disclosure, my son, he was starting to exhibit some behaviors that looked like ADHD, and his teacher asked me to get him tested. And this doctor asked, she was like, he wasn't experiencing these behaviors 2 months ago, or even when he started. And so it was, again, that disconnect of, yes, you're seeing this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what it doesn't always have to go right to that. What can we do? We're missing a lot of the behaviors and the actions and the trauma that is going on before the outburst of behavior. You're like shaking up pop. If your message is that your skin is a threat, like she was saying, your life is not valued, it is not important. You've got youth who are experiencing depression more often, feelings of hopelessness more often. And then at the same time, they're also experiencing getting in trouble more often, suspensions, expulsions. And so if you're always coming up against getting in trouble, outbursts, people look at you like, oh, there's that kid that is always messing up. Who are the people in your circle and community that you're going to feel comfortable to go to? And so, yes, that plays a part. And then you also have socioeconomic status, you know, depending on how you grew up. What was the message around mental health when you were growing up? What did you see? Was that, you know, oh, that's just crazy Uncle so-and-so, we don't really talk about him. Well, if you're experiencing some struggles, you're maybe not feeling comfortable to have that conversation with your support system, your parent, your caregiver, your trusted adult, because of that fear of, what is that stigma going to say about me? What are people going to say about me? And what I also found, just that feeling of, again, my life is not valued. You've got a lot of youth who are experiencing sexual abuse. Our young girls are growing up with this idea of sex, not necessarily engaging in sex, but being exotic, being sexy. And so you have higher Black girls who are engaging or who are having sexual abuse history, which also brings up those suicidal ideations, which also brings up those feelings of isolation and rejection. And so another key thing, has anybody ever heard of John Henryism? And remember, I can't see the chat. So, but that is just the idea that we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. You pick up, what is that saying? Put on your big girl panties and you keep it moving. And so a lot of, again, the message for our community is that you don't show emotion. Emotion is weak. You don't have time to cry. You don't have time to deal. You've got work to do. You need to get up, pull yourself together, and keep it moving. And so again, when a person who is experiencing sadness, feeling emotion, you don't have time to deal with that. You don't have time to stop, take care of yourself, and go into counseling, because your main concern is you have to keep it moving. And that is the message that we're giving. So what I also wanted to address was that we had mentioned, I heard like social media and things like that. Today's youth in general are very susceptible to what's on TV, what's on social media, how many, you know, my likes and how I feel about myself is directly connected to how many likes, how many laughs can I get, how many views can I get. And so that may mean I'm doing drastic things online to get those items. Every so often there's a new challenge going on. At the same time, you're turning on the news, you're turning on, you know, looking at your phone, and you're seeing a lifeless Black body laying in the street. And it's again showing that idea that your life does not matter. And so again, we have to be very mindful of, because now everything is so accessible. At the same time, our young boys and our young girls, they are growing up faster. because they have access to these things. They're able to see these things. And so this is also contributing to why Black boys and Black girls are at a higher risk. So I see the chat is moving fast. Is there any questions before I go into call to action?
Oh, go ahead. You're good.
Okay, there was a suggestion or a question. So a number of us are just like experiencing a lot of emotion or a lot of new information that we weren't aware of, and it's kind of disturbing. And so we're just inviting, our chat will be open through maybe like 2:15, a little later. So even if the facilitator, Ms. Arin, if you need to go, we understand. And know everybody are more than welcome to leave on time. But if you want to stay and to kind of continue the dialogue a little longer and get any closure, we will be here for that.
Excellent. I'm glad that that's an opportunity that's open.
And then
Was somebody else?
Yeah, I was going to say the other thing we were talking about was just when you were talking about the risk factors, we were kind of talking about whether those risk factors are increasing, or is it just our awareness of the risk factors are increasing? I definitely agree with the social media and how kids are growing up, but even I get roasted a lot because I didn't watch a lot of these typical movies or know the songs like that were associated with adults, because I don't know a lot of 90s music because I was a kid in the 90s. So I think the social media is definitely playing a part, but as far as the risk factors, are those increasing, or are we just more aware of it now? Kind of.
I'd say it's a bit of both. What I found is, I know when I was in school, if I did something or if I embarrassed myself, fell at school, if you weren't at school that day, you didn't know. It was at the end of the day, once I left my school room or even the school building, it was done. I got to go home, I got to go play with my friends, and it was over with. Whereas here now today, it's not. You do something at school, people who weren't even at school know about it. You go home and people are still talking about it. So it's a lot of things are more accessible than they were in the past. So these risk factors are still there, but because we have access to things, nothing is private anymore. You have risk factors that are increasing. The severity, excuse me, of those risk factors are increasing. And so it's again, I think it was somebody said, is it the cart before the horse or the chicken before the egg? And it's honestly, it's unknown. But what I do know now is access. There are a lot of things that are accessible. People that you don't even know can see something that you did, good or bad, all of that in between, and can talk about you. And if your main source of self-esteem and self-improvement is on that forum, that's where you're getting your fuel for who I am, how I see myself. And if people are talking about you in a negative manner, it can go in and out just that quick.
Can you go back to the previous slide? It's real quick. I just want to see because these are some of the ones I'm thinking about, and I'm just as a coach and a youth advocate, and possibly as a future parent, I'm just thinking about how to be proactive about some of these things. And some things we can control and some things we can't. So that's why I was just thinking about like the substance use. Are we seeing an increase in depression? Are we seeing an increase in delinquent behavior? Like those, is this just like kids have always been kids, or is it like, yo, this is different? Like the way they're acting is different, independent of technology. That's, and I'd open it to, anybody else who's working with our young folks. Are we seeing, like Tiandra made a point, like, are we seeing an increase in over-sexualization of Black girls, or, those kind of things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a question or an observation, and it's just that, our world is progressing in certain lanes, and in others, they aren't. And so the way that we teach right now is very monolithic on a wide scale, right? It's very sit down, shut up, listen to lecture. And it's like that no longer is helpful, because even right here, I think you recognize like this is going to be better if I just invite everyone to take the mic and ask questions and engage, because really to understand and even in my experience all the way up through multiple degrees, but then in the medical school, it's like a very traumatic experience. With med students, you know, physicians are the career with the highest suicide rate, attempt and success. And I think a lot of it is because there's so much pressure. I have to know, and people are being input with information to regurgitate for standardized tests and not challenged and invited to engage with information, to really start to seek understanding and start to develop critical thinking and that kind of like really fun way to engage with content. And so that just makes me go back to like delinquent behavior. People, we had a conversation about this in another professional development group we're in, and it's like there's no such thing as a bad student. And as soon as you think that it's a bad student, you become a bad teacher because you're not in a position to engage and invite. And so I don't think that there's all these things. And then Tupac said in an interview while he was incarcerated that, you know, we really focus on numbing emotion and expression. And it's like, only this is okay. We were gifted with a broad spectrum of emotion, and we want to condemn the outlier. So if you're too happy or too excited or too passionate, something's wrong with you. But if you're too sad or too depressed, then come on, you can get yourself up. And then we want to medicate to that median. And then let's not forget the psychodynamics of you know, all these synthetic drugs and what that does to our chemistry. Like that does a lot to our chemistry too. So that's correlated in there as well. But I will mute my mic.
No.
This is a good point.
This is excellent. I just felt like dialogue, it needed to be dialogue. And I'm glad that I went that route because as you all were talking, I feel like it's a mixture. Everything that you all said, it's a mixture. If you don't know how to necessarily advocate for yourself, if you don't know how to advocate for your child or your student, if you're a coach, they are the individuals that will essentially suffer. Sitting down, having that conversation, and like, I want to go to this slide. It talks about just how do we have this conversation? You know, how do we sit down? Before you can sit down with a young person that you are concerned about, you want to take a personal inventory and figure out, okay, how am I feeling? To talk about just in this dialogue right here, we're experiencing some nervousness, some anxiety over the conversation of dialogue. So imagine this conversation being had with your child, with a kid that you are concerned about. But so you want to take a personal inventory of how you're feeling. Have that person, that trusted person in your life that you can talk to about this. And then set the stage, you know, create a plan. Okay, these are the things that I'm seeing. These are the behaviors I want to talk about with my young person. These are the actions that I've seen. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be suicide. Maybe it's just I'm struggling to adjust. But starting that conversation at the very beginning, it helps you. It helps you be able to identify and start that process for advocacy, for getting into treatment, however that looks, for getting into mentorship programs early so that you're not having that conversation because you're in the hospital because your young person has attempted. And so also just being mindful of when you have that conversation. Don't have it when, you know, naturally when you're stressed, you're running around, your young person is stressed. You all, you know, try and anticipate, okay, if we have it now, how do you think they're going to respond? And then always taking a step back to allow yourself to process it, to process what was talked about, to process, you know, how did they respond? Were they being honest with me? But also sending that message to your young person that that's fine if you have nothing going on right now. You know, that's fine if you're not thinking about suicide. But when I see these things in you, when I see a change in you, I'm going to come to you and I'm going to want to have this dialogue with you. Because not only, it can be annoying, naturally, like, oh, here they come again. But it also is showing that young person, this is somebody who's really watching. This is somebody who they look like they're caring about me. So you could very quickly become that trusted adult for that person, where now you have a role to advocate and help them, but advocating on their behalf, whether it's with their parents or even the community mental health resources. Another thing really quick, there was something I wanted to really get into with you all. Yes. So the faith-based communities, I had mentioned earlier, just the important role when it comes to faith-based communities. As a society, as a whole, there is a lot of mistrust when it comes to mental health agencies, when it comes to just mental health clinicians in general, when it comes to the mental health holistic process. Like it was mentioned before about medication. Oh, you're just attempting to medicate my child. You want to medicate the symptoms so that they don't act the way that they do anymore. And so the key thing that we need to start doing when it comes to Black youth or youth of color is not only taking into, it may not be mental health treatment, it may be mentoring, it may be after school programs, it may be just presentations and having these kind of community forums like we're having here. But the key thing is you want to make sure that this is accessible to them. So it's going to where those young people are. And I think that's something that a lot of individuals, like a lot of mental health agencies may be struggling with. You know, you want to be flexible when it comes to working with young people of color. You want to give them dialogue, give them ability or a forum to talk about barriers to coming into counseling. You know, talk about what do you want to get out of coming here? What do you feel like treatment is going to look like? If it's not medication, that's okay. But we're looking at the holistic approach. So we're not going to just look at working with the student or the young person, but we're also looking to work at, let's talk about what do mom and dad say about you coming to counseling? What do your caregivers say? What does your community say? Because you want to essentially take it upon yourself to work with the whole person and their entire community. And so that's why a big charge for this process of potentially working and identifying ways to treat the young person of color who is experiencing depression is tapping into the church.
Hey, Arin.
Mm-hmm.
Since it's approaching 2:00, I just wanted to invite anyone who hasn't spoken yet to share any thoughts, comments, questions, or reflections, specifically any youth that we have on the call. I want to make sure that they have a chance to share their voice if they haven't done so already. No one has to. Just wanted to make space for them. If there's anyone else who wants to say something.
I'm trying to.
Otherwise, we can keep moving. We just want to make sure again we extended space for that. And if you need to put any questions or comments in the chat, feel free. We know this is a heavy topic, so I didn't want Tiandra, Arin, and I to take all the time speaking. But anyone wants to speak.
Yeah, and that's throughout the rest of the 15 minutes or whatever it is, again, in the chat or verbally. Not everybody is like hey, I want to say something. And you might have something to say that could add a lot of value to the conversation. So that's why we wanted to extend the invitation. Thank you, Arin. We definitely don't need to be silent though, moving on, or do we? Or maybe that's just my need for noise, and that's probably something I should be working on. But we got a comment. Isaiah said, I was all ears today, got new info fed into me. Thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate you, Isaiah. For y'all that don't know Isaiah, he's just a dope young person. He is on our Student Leadership Advisory Council, which hopefully he is open to reviving, and he does a lot of leadership with our young people and with ourselves. He's a confidant of mine. I was going through this week, and he actually spoke a lot of life into me, so I'm grateful for you, Isaiah. Yeah, man. Our young people are amazing, and like we're all amazing. But any last thoughts? So you know, so that way we're not sitting in silence. We appreciate all the information. I think we can talk about, because at first we were going to do 3 sessions at our 3 different locations. So hey, this might be a next attempt, and we can also get the flyer and stuff out. There's just been a lot of moving pieces, but I think that we all understand that right now. Speaking of the information that you provided, like attempts, and then also people who can survive through that, and the difference between having comorbidities. And that's the whole difference right now with the whole current COVID situation, is that you might contract it, but do you have other factors that make it more complex? Or are you living in a food desert? And right now, because of the current situation we're in, the one grocery store that you had to get fresh produce is closed, and then your immune system goes down because you're not being able to get the nutrients that you need, and then you don't have access to transportation because that's going down as well. Oh my goodness, what are we doing? So there's so many different ways we can be solution oriented, and I think that because you said like being proactive, being holistic in nature, and maybe learning a phrase that might add value to our community and our young people, because I know that suicide word might hurt your stomach because it hurt mine, and one of our coaches had said something like, hey, you know, just be kind of realistic and understanding with the numbers today with our young people, because they might not come with that. And so I'm like, gosh darn it, I knew that and I didn't think about it. So maybe, you know, it's just Wellness Wednesday with Arin, and that's how we shape it the next time. I'd love to have you back. We'd like to ask for one key takeaway. If there's nothing else that we knew, what's the one thing that you'd like to share from this conversation? The other thing is there some kind of resource or book, or is there maybe a longer interview with Taraji that you would encourage us to go get more information if we'd like? We like to build a library. And then the third thing is there an invitation? Would you like him to invite us to do anything, or even challenge us to do something? So it's a key takeaway, so a resource for our library, and then an invitation or a challenge.
Okay, a key takeaway. I'd have to say, if there's nothing else that you took away from this conversation, the big thing is that although our Black youth are at risk, we as adults, as I believe strongly in, I am my brother's keeper. And so now that you have this information, it is now your role and your responsibility to begin to figure out how to have this conversation with if you're a coach, with your mentees, how to comfortably have this conversation with maybe kids in your neighborhood, your children, and because ultimately I believe that's where it starts. You know, no longer we have to stop allowing the community to educate our kids and ourselves. And so use this as an opportunity to take it upon yourself to get in there, dig into the research, and have that dialogue about some of the things that you may be seeing in some of your kids, some of your mentees, to see, okay, how can I help you? How can I advocate for you? Okay, a resource. So I did look through a few videos before I found Taraji P's video. She did a really good speech to, I think it was Capitol Hill. And that is also a YouTube clip that you can find where she elaborated on just the struggles that she's had with trying to find her son a clinician, how, you know, where the foundation she developed, where that started. And also, I think she also talks about like the ways you can get funding. Also, another one is JED, J-E-D. It is a really good resource that you can look up. They have a lot of resources for mental health resources for kids of color, white youth, all of that. They go all the way from middle school, elementary, all the way into college. So if you all are working with that population as well, kind of getting them tapped into some online resources. Did I answer all three? Okay. Yes. So this was fun. I definitely appreciate the opportunity to do that. Yes, it is JED. Thank you, the JED Foundation. I definitely appreciate this opportunity. I am hoping that this is not my one and done, that you guys will see me and we'll be able to reconvene and see each other again and just continue to have this dialogue.
Yes, thank you. And I also wanted to honor Kay Evans' voice in the chat. It says, I truly appreciate the opportunity for allowing other AMP partners to join the session. This was a great topic to discuss, especially at this time in our lives. And I just want to say thank you for that comment. Greatly appreciate that as well. Yeah, so thanks for everybody coming together. Like we said, it's past 2. If you want to stay on and see like how intimate the room can get and then feel more comfortable speaking, then we will be on until 2:15. At 2:15, we'll have to transition into our next thing on our schedule. But Miss Arin, thank you so much. We are greatly appreciative of you being in the room. I think the beautiful thing is too, it's like, how can we get you an intern? We have a number of our young people who are interested in working in counseling, marriage counseling, all different kinds of things. But even if you share just about how your path, I think that's the next time we'll have you on and you just share about your path.
Yes, I would love to.
Yeah, we'd love that as well. So we'll get you on the schedule here soon, sometime in the month of May for sure. And yeah, thank you.
Put me on the program. Yes.
Everyone, it was so great seeing your faces, feeling your energy, and then enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Friday, we will be here for Industry Highlight. I have to make sure I remember who said yes this Friday. So we're either going to talk about hip hop and technology or auto mechanic entrepreneur. So yay. All right. Have a good one. Thank you, Ernest. I'll stay.